Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Expedition Self is a masterful, inclusive, transparent, and down-to-earth on-air conversation that invites you to seek real-time answers to your real-life exploration while gaining command around the language, the interrelationship, and the ways of being so critical to evolving and creating your most fulfilled life. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello. It's me, Sam Parrotto, and I want to thank you for joining me today. It is my favorite subject to talk about the relationship with the self and how we build a life that's reflective of that relationship. And our topic today is getting off the fix-me merry-go-round or hamster wheel or roller coaster or escalator, however you kind of want to think about it. We'll go into that a little bit more about what I mean by the fix me merry-go-round in just a moment, but I wanted to take just a couple minutes to get us started here. My goal always on the show is to provide you with just another small slice of what it looks like to build a robust and loving relationship with yourself. And on this particular show, my invitation, super clear, important, right, is that it's a call-in show. Because I want to hear how this conversation plays in your life. And I believe when we get into that shared space where you talk and I talk and we get to exchange, that's when the magic happens. So here's the phone number. It's 202-570-7057. So you can call in anytime. And when I get to a moment where I feel like I can pause, then I'll take a call. And so really, it doesn't matter whether you're syncing up exactly where the conversation is, because what really matters is that you're part of what I'm doing here in this hour. And that's this shared moment, right? So the other thing is that I want to talk about when you build a relationship with yourself, you get more conscious about what's going on inside. So instead of things like being in this big vacuum of the unconscious and just caught up in your movement, you begin to connect in momentary, even second by second ways, right? And so what you're connecting with are these ideas and feelings and thoughts that are buried beneath other ideas and feelings and thoughts. And that's what I hope to help you connect with. You might get to see something running behind the scenes that's playing a role in your life that when you see it, all of a sudden you get new freedom, you get new choices. So the other thing is that not everything that I say do I expect to sync up with you, right? And in fact, some of the words I use may even be like, what is she saying, right? But that's okay, because what we ultimately want is, I want you to allow yourself just to feel. You don't have to make sense of every word, right? You only, the idea of experience and allow yourself to be vulnerable is to let those feelings show up. And if you get to feel something with me, and of course I'm over here feeling a lot, I guarantee it, then we've had a masterful, really effective experience together. So, okay, it's time to settle in and allow your thoughts to become gentle, your belly to become soft, and your heart to ease open. I think that's probably a great place to start, which is, how important is freedom to you? The freedom to be who you are, the freedom to share your thoughts and feelings, to the sense that where you walk and what's going on inside of you is completely acceptable. Because those are the places where we try to fix ourselves, right? Those are the places where, when we want more freedom, what's underneath it is the things that we do to prevent us from having it. So these fixes, they might make you feel more accomplished, but a lot of the time, in my experience, the way we get the fixes is we browbeat and we demand and we control and we push ourselves around to get those fixes. And then, of course, the other part about the fix is that we oftentimes can't maintain them, right? I used to do that, but then it fell off, or I kind of, things happened in life and I couldn't get back to them. And the other thing about fixes is that they, in this merry-go-round that I'm talking about, is that the more you go after them, the more it reinforces that you need fixing. And that's this message that's running in the back of our mind, that like this thing that's going on inside of me that I want to accomplish in life, or that I want to have happen, or that I think isn't like a problem or an issue, that if that's going on in the back of my mind and then I do something about it, then it must be true that if I fix things get better. So this idea of fixing is tied to something about you being a problem, that you need a solution, that there's something you're feeling that's not something you want to change it, and that when it's handled, you'll feel this sense of freedom or this accomplishment, and you'll be able to check it off as done. So as we think about that, that's how a lot of us improve our lives, right? We have problems, we fix them. Things get better, and we stop suffering or feeling uncomfortable. We get that thing that we thought would make us happy, and there we are, right? But there's a human being level, there's a big difference, because enjoying and wanting to learn something and needing something to change or solve a problem, that's different, right? Needing something to change and solve a problem is different. So in the first case, it'd feel like, what might I like to explore next? Curiosity and possibility to discover something you haven't yet experienced. Like the seeker in you is planning the next big adventure. But if you're honest with yourself in the second example, there's this intensity that goes in our thinking, and it shows up a lot in our self-development. Like it's a desperate need. Like I've got to fix this. This has got to go away, right? There's this recurring thought that something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with how this is going. I don't like how I'm feeling. And it's like I'm not acceptable at some level. And I've got to do something about this feeling of inadequacy. And it's usually tied to a problem or a situation or a circumstance that you just want to go away. And oftentimes it has this sense that we might lose something, right, if we don't get it. We basically interact with ourselves as if we're like a super important home improvement project, rather than a person who's complex and experienced thousands of moments in life and grappling with how to bring all the shades and tones together in a way that feels free and alive and fulfilled. Like to be a person who feels, right, and is allowed to feel, and allowed to feel all those disjointed, disconnected, unconcluded things that go on in life. So I'm going to stop right there because we've got a caller from Arizona, and I'd love to hear what Denise has to say to all of us and what she has to share. Okay, I'm ready for Denise. There we go.
Hi, Sam.
Denise, are you there?
Hello.
Hey,
I am.
how's it
Can
going?
you hear me? It's going
Absolutely.
good. How are
You're
you?
on air.
Okay.
I'm awesome. I'm a little nervous.
Me too.
Really?
So calling in, on something that we want to fix, and I know that's why I started on the growth journey is, to fix things for years and years. So as you talk about how we experience everything and how, things get feeling in there and they get messy and we want to fix them. And we think about like our minds and how they work all the time to help us fix them. Yeah, I find myself in a place that while I know that the fixing thing is there, whether it's fixing myself, fixing my family, fixing, someone else. It's what do you do, or what are some of your top tips for whenever we actually end up believing it? Because I find myself going through and really on the growth path, and I'm not going to be in the fixing. I'm going to be in the feeling, and next thing I know, I'm completely someplace else, and my mind has fixed it for me, and I'm still fixing, if that even makes sense.
Well, I think it kind of does. I mean, what you actually saying here is that when you do actually fix things, it feels good and it works for you. Is that what you're saying? And so then you want to do more?
Well, I'm saying that, but also whenever you begin the journey of being able to feel it and letting the feelings come through and being with everything and searching, there's moments in time where you are allowing the experiences, allowing everything to be, and then all of a sudden it's like you find yourself someplace else, and your mind has already decided that you don't like the feeling and that person does need to fix something. Or I don't know how else to say what I'm trying to ask.
I think what you're describing, it's kind of like this allowing thing, right? That you're trying to describe. So the idea that, I'm going to be with all of those uncomfortable, vulnerable feelings that I normally would do something to get out of my space. So I let them go on for a while, and then, oops, look what happens. The mind kicks in. It's like, nope, now I'm off to doing the next thing.
Yes, thank you.
I think I think that's practice, honestly, and I think all the practice counts. Because we are just so wired up to not even realize that layer is available to us, or that there's information that's meaningful on that layer. So when you describe it, it's like, well, you're going in, you're doing the laps, right? You're going to the gym, you're lifting the equipment, and then, you get done with the workout and you're going, okay, listen, I'm going to go back to my life. But what happens when that occurs, and I'm sure you've seen this, right, is over time, you start to have more of an integrated experience, so that when you're actually in life trying to get things done, that you also then have a connection to, wait a minute, what's happening back here? Well, look at me. I rushed through that conversation because I could barely listen to my family member talk about what they were struggling with. And the more you get conscious, right, of, look at me rush through, look at me try to get to some destination that I can handle better, then your body and your psyche just starts to recognize, I can operate in a different place here.
Okay, that's funny because as I'm, doing the growth stuff, and then all of a sudden I find another place, and, doing the laps, lifting the weights, and now I'm back at, my mind has decided that there's got to be a shortcut to get out of the mess, because that was what I called in for is whenever it gets messy and it doesn't feel well, and you don't like how it's feeling, what are some tips to keep you in the game? It's just more laps and more weights is what you're saying.
Well, I do actually think that the being able to think about what is it that I would like to do. Remember, I talked a little bit at the beginning of the show of this creative, what would I be curious about? What would I be drawn towards? I think when we start to turn on that curiosity about it, so this is where I might actually do something that would look like a fix. I might actually say, you know what, I'm going to get up 5 mornings straight at 6 a.m. and see what it feels like, and see if it actually does produce this like higher productivity that I'm wanting. So it's really more about where you come from in it versus this kind of unconscious, I don't even realize it, but I'm trying to race away from myself, versus the idea that I'm taking it on with a lot of intention, and I'm choosing to make it a place where I learn about myself, and I see if I can feel things while I'm actually in the process of doing. So that's my thing, is I always try to default back to the curiosity. And then the other thing I try to do is capture everything I'm thinking and feeling when I'm wanting a change, so that I really listen to all the aspects of myself that might have a voice about it, might have an opinion about it. Those would be 2 things I'd say are worth thinking about.
Okay. It's fascinating because here you talk about the default back. Here I call in, and then here that's really a default back to how can I make it easier and intellectually write something down for tips. So it's fun. That's fascinating. No, it's very.
You landed right back in it, didn't you?
Oh my gosh! Yes. Okay.
Well, can I just say thank you for calling in early? It's nice for me just as a person because I get to like share my joy and my conversation with someone who's also in it. But then the other part is that it also on a purely like, oh my gosh, I'm on the radio. I don't have to do it all alone. Right. So thank you, Denise. I so appreciate
you are welcome.
to hear from you today.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you for the help. You too.
You're welcome. The other thing I just want to let all of you know when I gave you the phone number that you're going to be answered by the producer of OMTimes Radio, and he's going to put you in the queue. That's what makes this such a special experience to be on the air, is that I get to have this wonderful, caring person care for you too and me all at the same time. And he's listening and making sure that things are running smoothly. And so it's really extraordinary. So I'm hoping that anybody who has called in case you were surprised when a gentleman answered the phone, they thought, oh no, I got on the wrong call. No, you didn't. You actually were landing exactly where I was hoping that you would. All right. So, gosh, that was awesome from Denise. So this thing about fixing is that it's like a place where we leave our inner self, and that's where we're going to go next.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them?
By their clothes,
their age,
the way they speak.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
We've all felt left out. And for people who move to this country, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
So, I'm back. I want to talk a little bit about one of the pieces that I think really helps to make sense of this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I don't know how many of you have heard about this, but Maslow believed that there were these various needs and that you had to meet your needs at this level before you could go to the next one. And so the lowest level was the physiological needs like eating and sleeping and a roof over your head. And then the next level was safety needs. And the level above that was belongingness and love needs. And then esteem needs, and ultimately self-actualization. What's really interesting is after Maslow put all this out, many scholars later talk about the fact that all these needs are running together all of the time. And so that you're really actually working at some level trying to get these needs met, constantly. So when you think about it, if these needs are running behind the background, both at the very survival level and all the way up to the self-actualization, what's really going on is you are actually looking for solutions, right? There's a need and you're trying to fill it. There's an opening and you want to make something happen that fills that opening. But what actually I think happens is that our survival mechanism, the part of our brain that thinks that like we must have it, it actually, and remember, it's the base one is the physiological, right? Is it infuses all of the other levels. And the next thing you know, we feel desperate to feel accomplished. Or the next thing you know, we feel like we must achieve that degree, because if we don't, then we won't feel like we're worthy of something. And so we've got this complex thing running really beneath us all the time, right? Hold on one second here. There we go. I've got some notes here that I'm using today because I thought I'm going to try a different formula this week and see if giving myself a few notes actually lets it settle down for me. And then all of a sudden they got locked up. Was like perfect. So the thing about all these needs and all the ways that you're chasing, right, life and trying to get it to meet what you want is that you are on the inside. Right? Like you're down there and you're actually wanting to feel like you're enough and you're wanting to be okay with what it means to be human, which is to feel. But what also comes with that territory of you is that we don't really like to feel. The brain really doesn't like to feel. The brain wants to stay way on the top of all that. We don't like discomfort. We don't like confusion. We don't like unsureness. And so there's a built-in mechanism at that level that really is the fix, right? Because it's right there that we actually have trouble being with ourselves. So if you think about it, let's say the person who wants to lose 30 pounds, let's walk through it, all right? So we want to lose 30 pounds. We could say that it's because for health reasons. All right, so that's at the physiological level. And I think, well, yeah, I'd really like to lose that weight. Okay, but that's not based on curiosity, and it's not based on being interested in something. It's based on there's something that needs to be fixed about me. And it's likely that I have other feelings that go on in there. Like, what do I feel walking around in my body with 30 extra pounds? What does my weight have to do with how I see myself in life, how I'm related to by others, or what I think I get from others? And really, as I keep working with that whole idea, now I've decided I'm going to exercise 5 days a week, and I'm going to change my eating. I'm going to do all these things. So now I put a huge emphasis on all the things that I can actually go do. But I've left really the place where I have a relationship about those 30 pounds and how I think about myself and how I allow myself to be who I am and what I accept about myself. So by the time I've done the month-long attempt to lose my 30 pounds, and boy, are there a lot of opportunities out there to help us do this. If I didn't do it from a creative, like, how do I get up and underneath a life where I want to be really healthy and alive and vital, and what does that bring up for me in terms of my own thoughts about life? Then what I've done now is I've now set up really a kind of top-down, dominating, push myself around, run the show from the top kind of dynamic with myself. This is what we're talking about with this fix thing, right? Like, how do you keep coming from the deepest part of the whole self? And yes, you would still create a life where you might actually exercise 5 days a week, but you're doing it from a place where you're in touch with all of those thoughts and feelings and the inner world that actually lives beneath and around every one of those pounds. So, in June of 2010, Brené Brown gave her TED Talk about shame resiliency. And I was excited. I happened to be sitting in the audience at one of her early speeches. And I felt like, oh my gosh, this woman has given us a way to think about self-help in an entirely different way. And while she was on the stage, she said, "We are a society in a crisis of not enough." And so for today's show, I went and hunted up a write-up of her TED Talk, and it said something like that she found that through all of her research, there was a pervasive sense of shame, making many of us feel unworthy of human connection. Because in this perfectionistic culture, we're not thin enough, rich enough, smart enough, beautiful enough. And we can't afford, this is the big piece, right? We can't afford to let our guard down and become vulnerable, because letting others see us as we really are would mean we'd be rejected out of hand. That's what we're doing to ourselves. Feel unworthy of human connection. You see, it's our own connection with our own humanity. And it creates a sense of lack of worth when we don't have it because it's missing. And then this idea that we don't want anyone to see us and we don't want to be vulnerable because we'd be rejected out of hand, that sets up this idea that we have to be something more, we have to be perfect, or we have to keep it up, right? We have to keep our sense of movement, like forward movement, get it all done, make it happen. We have to keep all that moving in order to be acceptable to ourselves. That's the merry-go-round we're on. That's it. So, all right, I'm going to remind you, I would love to have a caller at 202-570-7057. Again, you can share any way that you like. We're talking about this idea of what is a fix and how does it connect to our vulnerability and being with ourselves. And remember, when you call in, there's going to be an amazing gentleman answer you who is the producer of OMTimes Radio, and he's going to put you in the queue so that you can come on and talk with me. So I'm going to go a little further here, right? So it gets compounded, right? Because there's a $12 billion self-help industry out there, and it is designed to connect you with all these better lives. Remember all these Maslow's levels, right? And it's helping us self-actualize and pursue happiness and improve our lot in life. And of course we should want that, right? Of course that should be how it should go. But here's the thing. You know what they use? A lot of the ways we get people going is that, they use the hook of fixing you to actually get you in the door. And this is such a conundrum, right? There's such a line here, because I think we all know half of us won't do anything unless something like grabs a hold of us and motivates us to do it. And so I think the way it gets justified is, listen, we're going to use the hook because we know ultimately you'll be better off. But the problem is that when we choose that hook based on this idea that we're trying to fix ourselves, we perpetuate the very thing that works on top of really gaining a deeper and true relationship with ourselves. We collude with this industry by relating to ourselves as though we're something to be fixed, right? Like, oh, sure, come on over, we'll show you how not to procrastinate, right? Oh, we're helping you with anger issues, right? You can make the marriage that you always wanted. Their message is change this about yourself and then you'll be something. And that something is likely tied to a flaw or a problem or a solution. So that's the merry-go-round. It starts with our own lack of connection with our inner self, where we can really be with all those uncertain feelings, those places where we're not sure or we're confused. And then it connects, right, with all of these ideas of how we're going to try to make our life better, and we're going to try to self-actualize and even take care of all of the obvious things we need, like food and shelter, right? And then what happens is we don't even realize it, but then we participate by buying into programs and activities and books, thinking that they're going to fix. And, Denise, when she called in, she was talking about it. It's like, well, shouldn't there be a shortcut? Shouldn't I be able to do it in a shorter way? And I just have to say, in my own process, I haven't found any shortcuts that way. Because, to me, the going through the center is really where I want to just say it again. The going through the center, which means really dealing with myself fully and completely. That is what actually produces a sense of personal power and a sense of substance and being in relationship with ourselves. I'd like to tell you a little bit about when I started in my growth work. When I began, I was in my early 20s, and it included therapy and body work. I did a lot of meditation and creative visualization. And I was loving it, right? But I was doing it because I was a horrible leader and I wanted to stay married, and I didn't have a lot of people around me that stayed married. So there was this desperation. Like I wanted to feel like I was in some way, what do I want to say? Like I could be like everyone else. I could be mainstream. And I was sure that if I didn't figure it out, my life was not going to work out. And so there was this point along the way, I think it took a few years really, when I started to realize that the relationship I was developing with myself was like, booyah. It was so satisfying, like to realize what I was thinking and feeling and to understand what it was connected to. Can you imagine like going from being really clueless and not understanding and feeling like something's deeply like off about me because I couldn't figure out how to be a better leader, to actually realizing that all that really mattered was that I get in relationship with myself. And so that's when it shifted. I liked understanding why I did things, why I said the things I said. And it became this incredible, like tantalizing, compelling journey that I've been on really ever since. So we have another caller, and I'm going to introduce her, Lindsay from Maryland. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Hi, Sam. Hi,
Lindsay. It's nice to hear from you.
I'm a little nervous.
Okay, well, I'm with you. So take some deep breaths with me, and we'll settle down and just chat. I do want to let you know we have a break coming in about 5 minutes, so I may have to stop us in the middle depending on where we're at, all right?
Okay.
So what's up?
One of the things that struck me while you were just talking about kind of fixing and then the Brene Brown, I was starting to connect it to your show last week with talking about flipping the painting over and trying to like draw it then, and how that almost like provided a level of relief. And I'm kind of almost thinking about that in like how we hold our self-value, that we have this like ideal, which is the painting, and that if we can really work on ourselves, you could almost flip the painting over to stop comparing yourself to that ideal and kind of think more about the parts rather than the end result. So does that make sense? Oh my gosh. I'm sitting here kind of like with my chin down to my knees. Wow. I never actually saw that at all, but it makes complete sense. I'm like sitting here having my own epiphany. Thank you so much. It's like it never dawned on me that that's right. That when I turned the page over on Benjamin Franklin, that I was also doing that on my own sense of me. Is that what you're saying, right? Yeah, that it's like, I don't know. And it even, when you were speaking about, I'm like losing the part. I'm sorry, I have a 3-year-old.
Hey, I'm honored you called.
So I think there was something about in the way of the fixing that it's almost like you're picking apart those individual elements that are that part of that painting. And then instead of, I don't know, picking apart those I don't know. It was something about it that just struck me and really connected to what you had said last week. And I thought that was cool. So I was kind of checking to see if I just made that up on my own or how that worked.
No, I think you're on track. I think you make a new point, though, which is this idea of picking ourselves apart. I haven't really spoken about it this week that way, but I do think that we find ourselves saying, oh, that has to be fixed or that has to be fixed. It's like the thread that you start pulling on, and before you know it, you have a hole in your coat. Right? Yeah, picking that we do. And I'm sorry, what?
No, I was agreeing.
Yeah. So I think when we talk about turning this fixing mode on its ear, and you start looking at, wait a minute, what if I really care more about my relationship with myself, and really stop getting so hooked on what it looks like, right, out into the world, which is this very idea of the picture. That we just in that moment, we take a new stand for ourselves. We actually stake a claim, right? Like a new claim that we wouldn't have done before.
Yeah, that's
Lindsay?
Cool.
Are you still here?
I am. The
so
delay
did you have
is
any...
definitely a little weird. Sorry.
Oh, is that right? There's a delay? I'm sorry about that. This technology stuff doesn't always kind of connect exactly right. Was there anything else you actually wanted to share?
No, I think that was kind of the gist of it. Now I'm definitely kind of spinning off from it, but that was cool.
It was for me too. Actually, I really appreciate it. I will forever think of Benjamin Franklin and now also as me. So really appreciate you calling in.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. Bye.
Bye.
So, gosh, that was awesome. I just want to make my final point about my own story. And that is that, I'm describing that I felt like there was a problem for me and that it was me, but it wasn't the problem of being a bad leader or a clueless wife. What it was a lack of relationship with myself. And these things were indications or billboards or reflections of what was happening in my missing relationship. And that's the thought here, right? What if you take the case that all these things you're trying to fix are really places in yourself that you actually just have yet to build a relationship with? So, all right, I think we have to go to break again, and I'll see you after break.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
With so much loss, you may feel like you can't handle it all. Meditation or other spiritual practices can help you feel more grounded and better able to cope.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose. To link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
The Equal Justice Initiative, we believe mass incarceration has to end. We have to confront our history of racial injustice and commit to a new era of truth. And the truth can inspire change. Please learn more at eji.org.
So we're back, right? All right. I do want to just mention something. The producer has mentioned that there's a number of people who have called in on the 202-570-7057 number and then hung up. And I think that can get just a little bit confusing. Really, on the site, there's a listen button, and all you have to do is push that, and then you can listen from there. You don't actually have to call in to listen. That the call-in number that I just read is really the number when you're going to come on air with me and talk with me. You also can just leave a question, and the producer will send it over to me, or a comment, and I'll get to see it, because we have a communication going throughout the whole show. Listen, I do think this is just the coolest thing, I think, that's happened in my life in just so long, is to get to have this experience. So I do want to make sure I say thank you again to Denise and to Lindsay for calling in. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. All right. So we're at this moment where I was talking about that what we're really missing is this relationship with ourselves, and that the things we try to fix about ourselves, or the things we pick at, or that we find ourselves not wanting to feel and replace by some form of doing or activity, that those are really indications of aspects of a relationship with ourselves we can build. But I have another thing, which is why I have a reaction to the fixing stuff, and why I'd love to encourage all of us to get off this merry-go-round. And that is that we turn it on each other, and we turn it on our kids. And we don't relate from the beginning, right? As like a curious, let me listen, let me explore. What is there to be understood? What are we experimenting with? We tend to block the vulnerability that other people are actually trying to bring to the moment. And we push for some defined conclusion or outcome that makes us feel comfortable. And I do see it really all the time. So with kids, if you think about it, when your child comes to tell you, hey, listen, I just broke your favorite pot. Well, there it is. So what happens? I just broke your favorite pot. And it's like, well, and we can fix it. No problem. It's not a big deal. I'll get a new pot, right? But what's the experience of the child who's telling you they just broke your favorite pot? I know pots don't really break. It's like there's something that happens in there when we can be with the deeper experience or the feelings that actually live in that moment. And, I feel like that's what we do in our jobs, right? People are constantly coming in their job and saying, I would like to learn how to do this. And before you know it, it's tied to all these metrics and these results and these plans. And now there's an expectation of how you're going to learn it and what you're going to do with what you're going to learn with it. So it just starts closing in all of the possibility of our creative and organic and our natural interest of what happens when I think and feel what I do. So if we go down a layer, it's like this idea that acceptance is that we are enough, right? It gets you to ground zero. Now, when I say that, I don't mean you believe it, right? I don't think we all believe it, and I don't think we believe it on all things, and I don't believe it that we believe it in every minute. Okay, that was a mouthful, right? But you take the case that I'm going to begin with accepting myself, and I'm going to accept the things I don't accept, and I'm going to notice that when I don't accept them, I'm going to accept that, right? You only don't just go for the acceptance, you go for the anti-acceptance. Did that make any sense? Right? And so when you do that, then it allows you to begin to relate and connect with yourself as at least noticing where you are, right? At least noticing. So you take the case that life is a learning. And that really Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those are needs, but what's underneath all of that is our actual need to learn about who we are in our lifetimes. That's the baseline to learn, to understand, to connect, to really get to know and become intimate with things. So you take the case that life is learning as the core place to operate from. There is a huge vulnerability that just comes with that, right? And we start to recognize that the reason we don't want to see things as learning is it means we are going to feel pain. We're going to feel disappointment. Things are going to be hard. There's going to be a lot about it that's unknown. It's totally right for judgment, particularly from others, if not just from ourselves. And so really, you begin a different thought about how life can move and what can be done with it when you start to come from this learning. It looks like we've got another caller, so I'm going to stop right there. And I've got Diana from Pennsylvania.
Hi, Sam.
Hey, Diana. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks. I've been listening to this thing about not fixing, and I really do listen to all the programs that tell me how I could be kinder, create more love in my life, and all the things that sound really cool. And then when I'm left to look at myself as to why it's not happening, I find areas like, well, when I was with my family last, I was very selfish. And so when I come home and I think about it, it's like, well, that's not creating love. That's being selfish. And then I'm like, well, I clearly have to fix that, because who wants to be selfish? So when you say, well, just, I don't know what you said, learn about it or be with it, I find it's really painful to realize how selfish I am.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to say that again. It's right. Yeah, it is. And really, you know, I feel like you have a sense of this, right? Is that at a human level, that's the piece we don't want to be with. But what's wrong with it, really? We've decided somewhere along the way that it's some problem about us. Really, the idea of I'm really selfish, I would say, well, what's under there? What do you need? What's going on? How do you talk about those things that are happening for you? How do you learn about this so-called thing that you've decided is selfish? I mean, there's so much judgment in that, right? And we have a lot of judgment about selfishness in this society. Kind of irks me, really. But the yeah of it is you just start, right, having to settle in. And it is very, I feel oftentimes like it's like the Hulk moment, where you just feel yourself almost stretching in your own skin, trying to make room for it not to be what you've always thought it was. And I think that's an incredibly experiential moment where you just say, no, I'm going to learn about it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to consider that my selfishness has something to show me about life. And it might be that I just get to undo the definition of it. Right? It might mean that I get to like experiment. Well, if I'm really selfish, what are all the things I would do? Right? Mm-hmm. If I really, really went from that, right? So I don't know. How does that land for you?
Well, I do like what you're saying, but when I think of the last time it happened to me, I just do feel like a horrible person, and I have a hard time moving out of it. You know?
Yeah.
I think that is.
So there it is. You can feel it in your body right now. Yeah. Well, so when you say, I just really do feel like a horrible person, it's right in that space of the horrible person that you would actually go to work, right? You'd start asking questions. Where did this idea of horrible come from? What is it feeling like in my body? What moments from my life has led to these conclusions about horrible? Where's the disconnect for myself? What needs are actually driving me that led to this moment for me? Like, I think that's where the curiosity has to kick in when you're feeling the worst. Right. Which is what you're describing, is that horrible, horrible feeling. Mm-hmm. It's hard to do then, right? Like, because really what you want to do is curl up in a ball and feel all that shame that Dr. Brown was saying, right? But that's actually the moment to go in with your curiosity, because your flashlight, your desire to be interested is actually going to free the part of you that wants to curl up in a ball, because you're saying, I want to see. I want to look. I want to understand what you're feeling at the very moment that the primary part of you, or that aspect of you, is wanting to curl up in a ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, that does help, because it certainly gives me something to do than just to be stuck in being a horrible person. So I will certainly try it. You know.
Yeah, and I would do I would do a lot to like allow the horrible, like debunk the word horrible too, right? Like, what is it horrible really? Remember when I said I was a horrible leader? Really to look at what was all that going on. Can I just say thank you for bringing such a personal, real example for us to talk about? I think, you know, there's a lot of vulnerability in that, and I think it's the thing it's even hard to admit, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. I am feeling a little embarrassed.
Well, I think it was awesome that you would share it with all of us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a great afternoon or evening or whatever it is. All right. So I also had another question while Diana was online, which is when someone asked you to perform a task and you're confronted, what words can you use to settle yourself down so you can perform the task and move forward positively and accomplish the task? Well, I really love words like ouch or hey, I'm feeling something here and I just would like to talk through it, right? Whenever we create room to get more understanding or pay attention to what's going on with us, I think that it makes room for us to then see what other choices we have or have options, because the moving forward is really largely dependent on whether or not you can make space for what's really going on for you. So I hope that gives you just a little bit of a thought there. I wanted just to get back to this idea of acceptance and getting curious and making learning like the baseline need. And so, the thing you want to think about is that by walking around buying into the idea that there's something to be fixed or something to be avoided, it lessens the possibility that you will actually hear all of the inner information in your internal self. Right? And so there's no question that when we live, that there are certain things and elements and building blocks that when they're put together, life definitely works better, right? We know this. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing. You have to eat, and you have a roof over your head, and you have relationships that you want to be mutually beneficial, right? You need to be able to take care of yourself, but there's a learning process in all of that. So the idea that I'm trying to create life and I'm trying to self-actualize and I'm trying to feel more things and I want to have a sense of being in life in a way that's deeply, deeply fulfilling. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. It may not be working exactly for me, but it doesn't make it wrong. And that's where I have to start really thinking about a different way to relate to things. So, let's see, I think there was one more thought I wanted to mention. That's right. So this idea that we don't have tolerance or patience for the experience of learning, that's what we can turn back on and begin to do again. And our mind has gotten to be such a mechanism. It reminds me of the steampunk era where all the gears are going, right? We've got to start looking at the mind as a set of gears rather than the runner of the show. We humans are more complex than that. And by really honoring that complexity that I think we're starting to come into more and more now, we're able to begin to shift this idea of let me fix things, let me avoid my feelings by putting something in place that makes me feel better. That I'm now able to instead learn about myself and be curious about myself. And that is what actually creates a much bigger, broader relationship with myself and opens up the space to ask those questions. It opens up the space to actually be with those inner parts of myself like Diana was talking about. So I'm hoping that this has shed some light on fixing. I'm hoping that you actually might have seen a spot where you've been trying to fix something about yourself. And maybe in this last breath, you can think to yourself, you know what? I'm going to accept my humanness. I'm going to allow my vulnerability here. And I'm going to, instead of having a disconnect with myself and being ashamed of something that I think is not good enough, I'm going to consider that it's all part of my amazing, amazing journey, and that I am the star of my own movie, my own book, right? My epic adventure. So I wanted to leave with a poem, and I thought about this for the show, so I'm going to try it today and see how it goes. Hopefully you'll all like it. And this is a poem by Wendell Berry, and I snagged it off of Robin Young's website, featherflint.com, and she's a writer, and she collects and also does her own writing, and I just thought this one fit today. It's called The Piece of Wild Things. When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feed. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day, blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. I loved that poem, particularly because of the place where it said forethought of grief. And I think of grief as part of shame. And so when we think about that, you notice it ends up with, for a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So I'm going to place this poem on my radio page at samparrotto.com if you'd like to see it in writing and pick it up for yourself. I do love poetry, particularly when I'm able to reread it. So I say thank you for coming to my show today. Thank you for spending the hour with me. Thank you for helping me be in life in a new way as well.